Hi, I'm Rusty Komori, and this is Beyond the Lines on ThinkTech Hawaii. I was the head coach of the Punahou School boys varsity tennis team for 22 years, and we were fortunate to win 22 consecutive state championships. This show is based on my books, Beyond the Lines and Beyond the Game, and it's about leadership, character, and creating a superior culture of excellence. My special guest today is a highly respected NFL analyst on NFL Live. She is Mina Kimes, and today we are going beyond ESPN. Hey, Mina, welcome to Beyond the Lines.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Mina, I know that you were born in Omaha. I went to Creighton University in Omaha, but can you share more a bit about your background growing up?
Yeah, so the reason I was born in Omaha is that my dad was in the Air Force. I was actually born on Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha. And from there, lived like an Air Force brat in a number of different states, number of different bases. Fort MacArthur in California. I lived in California twice. I lived in Michigan, Virginia, Arizona. I think I do them all out of order all the time because I moved around so much as a child before eventually going to college in Connecticut at Yale. But I've always been a Seattle sports fan, and people ask me why. Well, I didn't actually live there, but my dad was from Seattle. So I grew up with his Seattle allegiances, University of Washington, the Seahawks, the Mariners, the Sonics, when they had the Sonics. And I sort of count myself as a lifelong Seattle sports fan as a result.
Wow, it just grew on you right there. And Mina, did you play any sports growing up?
I did. I played a number of sports as a kid. I ran, I tried a bunch of different things, softball, but the one sport I played from pretty young, early childhood through the end of high school and really casually beyond was soccer. Played soccer for my schools. I played club soccer again into high school. In Arizona, I was on the varsity soccer team all 4 years there. I was not good enough to play at the collegiate level, but I was a lifelong soccer player until I got to college, and I loved it very much.
Wow, that's great to hear. I did soccer too. I think like almost everyone plays soccer growing up. And Mina, I know that you are an award-winning journalist. Actually, you've won multiple awards, but can you share with our viewers the wide spectrum of topics that you've covered in journalism?
Yeah, wide spectrum is a good way to characterize it because I've had a pretty winding journey as a reporter. I started off as a business journalist covering investing. I actually started my career during the financial crisis going into 2008. I was a very young reporter at Fortune magazine. I covered investing, and I was part of the investigative team there, and then ultimately the investigative team at Bloomberg News, where I wrote about basically companies doing troubling things. And it was from there that I was hired at ESPN again as a senior writer, but in a very different capacity. I was hired by ESPN the magazine to profile athletes, write features about sports, did cover stories and features on athletes ranging from Darrelle Revis to Jalen Ramsey to Luka Doncic to Aaron Rodgers to our mutual friend Michael Bennett and his brother.
Wow, that's amazing. And Mina, I want to ask you, why is NFL Live such a successful show?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you very much for saying so. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so I've been on NFL Live for about a little over 3 years now when we sort of rebooted it with the new cast. It's ESPN's daily football show. And when we rebooted it, I think we landed on something that I would say is probably key to this current success of the show, which is we put together a cast of analysts and our host Laura Rutledge that truly love each other. I mean, my teammates on NFL Live, my castmates, I consider to be amongst my closest friends now. They're people that I talk to every day about football, that I text with about football, but also people who know everything that's going on in my life as well. And I think that translates to on-air chemistry because were not afraid to rib each other, to make each other laugh, to agree, to fight. And I think viewers really like that family sort of dynamic that exists on the show right now.
Yeah, it really comes across that all of you are just so real, so authentic, so genuine. And I was watching NFL Live last week, just before the draft started, and it was really fun watching you guys because the Aaron Rodgers trade news came up with the Jets, and seeing you guys' reactions. And can you share about what your thoughts were going on at that
Yeah,
time?
I'm glad to, because we all kind of freaked out when the news came in and sort of the reaction went viral. But it wasn't, I want to clarify, we weren't surprised by the fact that the trade happened. Of course, this is a trade that had been in the works for, I think, over a month at this point. And everybody knew that Aaron Rodgers was going to be a Jet, more likely than not. But when our insider, the great Adam Schefter, told us the news, the order he spoke in when he was relaying the trade compensation, we were all reacting to it seemed at first like the Packers had gotten the Jets' first round pick, and it wasn't. We didn't know that it was going to be a pick swap, and that was shocking to me because at that point I thought, that first round pick by itself was off the table, and it turned out it was off the table. It was swapping 13 for 15, which is certainly less dramatic, although it did have some interesting ramifications in the recent draft.
No, I mean, that's so good for you to be able to clarify it right there. And Mina, of the quarterbacks that got drafted in this year's draft, who do you feel will be or have the most chance of succeeding?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because so much of whether a rookie quarterback, succeeds in the NFL really relies on where he lands. Frankly, destination makes such a difference, not just for quarterbacks, but I would say especially for the quarterback position, because it's so contextual, it's so dependent on scheme and weapons and protection and coaching. And to that end, I think the number one overall pick, Bryce Young, not only deserved to go one overall, it would have been my pick, but I also think he probably landed in the best situation of the group. The Carolina Panthers put together a really great staff. Their new head coach, Frank Reich, is, I think, a very good offensive play caller, good experience with quarterbacks. And he gets to play behind an offensive line that I think has the potential to be one of the better units in the league. So there's a lot of things working in his favor that would probably contribute to his success in the NFL.
I completely agree with you there, Mina. And what are your thoughts about Stetson Bennett?
Yeah, that was an interesting pick for the Rams, who of course have a starting quarterback, Matthew Stafford, but are kind of in an interesting transitional phase as a franchise after winning the Super Bowl. You could call it sort of a bit of a rebuild, but then they also have some stars in place. I think they saw an opportunity not only to get a new backup quarterback for Stafford, but also, invest in a guy in Stetson Bennett that was probably a bit underrated as a prospect. A player who at Georgia was counted out multiple times during his career, but always either beat out internal competition or shown or rose to the occasion in big moments. Granted, with a very talented supporting cast. And so, I think to get him late in the draft where the Rams did, they saw a lot of value there, and it makes sense.
Yeah, it is really interesting to hear your insights about that as well. And Mina, myself, along with millions of people around the world, I mean, absolutely love watching ESPN. What are some of the reasons why you love working with ESPN?
Oh boy. I've had an interesting path at ESPN, because what I do now is not what I did when I started the company. I started entirely as a writer. I was hired to write, and I loved it. But a couple of years into that job, I was given opportunities in podcasting to talk about football, not just report on it, to work in ESPN radio, to be a contributor on shows like Highly Questionable, the Dan Le Batard Show, Around the Horn, which I still do. And then ultimately, I transitioned to becoming a full-time NFL analyst. But I think to answer your question, what's been so great for me personally about working at the company is because ESPN is such a big company with such a breadth of offerings. I've gotten so many different opportunities to try new and different things. And I know that that's very rare and I don't take it for granted.
Yeah. Now, how is it, Mina, being among other friends of yours, okay, other expert NFL analysts when you guys are on these panels? But it seems like you have such a great passion along with your co-hosts or team members. I mean, where did all this passion come from?
Well, I just have always loved football ever since I was a little girl. It was a passion that was instilled in me by my dad. Not too uncommon, right? A lot of people come to the sport via their parents. And even when I was a business journalist before I worked for ESPN, it was a hobby of mine on the side that I spent entirely too much time on, not just watching football, but consuming football content, listening to voices that I liked, reading writers that I liked. So for me, the opportunity to turn that passion into a full-time job, first as a writer and then as an opinionator, which is a role that I certainly never envisioned for myself or thought possible, it's just an absolute dream. And I try to remember that, sometimes if it's during the season and I'm traveling and I'm just trying to squeeze in as many games as possible, just to remind myself that I get to do something for a living that I know a lot of people would absolutely love to do. And a young version of myself certainly would be bowled over if she knew that that's where her path was headed.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure. How exciting. I mean, your younger self would be like, whoa, I can't wait for this to happen.
Yeah.
And Mina, you mentioned some other shows on ESPN, but you were also a guest on PTI, Pardon the Interruption. And I mean, these other shows on ESPN, they're so smart to have you and some of your other friends as guests on the show. And what do you really like about, being on PTI or some of those other shows that you had mentioned?
Yeah, all the shows that I do at ESPN are really different. I've gotten to fill in as one of the two hosts on PTI a few times, often with my colleague who you see there, Frank Isola, who's great. And that's a really fun show because you get to cover, obviously, a wide breadth of sports, but the format is so well known. It's so familiar to so many Americans. So to just step into that role and get to fill those big shoes and try to give smart opinions concisely. It's a challenge and it's an exciting one that reaches a very big audience. The other shows I do though, like Around the Horn, that show is really fun because it's similar where it's very structured, but totally different cast of characters, like a family. It's people that I've worked with now for 5 years, even though I never see them. I feel like they're my close friends. Or there's a show like First Take that during the season I do once a week, totally different, with Stephen A. Smith, who is, such an incredible entertainer. And with that show, it's just kind of about bringing your energy to meet him on his level, to stay true to yourself while also making good television that fits the format. All of these shows present different challenges and different opportunities, and I kind of enjoy getting to flex different muscles on all of them.
Well, you do rise when you're with Stephen A. Smith. You do rise to his level. And Mina, what is it about Stephen A. that you admire?
He's just so good at doing television. I mean, you're on television, so you understand there's a real craft to it, to being a performer, to keeping people's attention, to being entertaining while also being informative and giving opinions you believe in. And I don't think there's anyone in sports television who is as talented at doing exactly that than Stephen A. Smith. I mean, he is just a riveting television presence. And being on television is something I personally have had to work at. It doesn't come naturally to me. And so I often look to people like him and other people in our industry for inspiration as far as the craftsmanship side of it.
Wow. Mina, I want to ask you about someone who's extremely special to you and really gaining in popularity. Your famous dog, Lenny. How's Lenny doing?
He's good. As usual, he's napping downstairs right now. If it's not breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or he's walking, that's usually his state, napping. But Lenny's great. I adopted him when he was about 3 years old, and he's now 12. So he's been in my family for a long time. I think it's pretty funny that, he has, I would say, a bit of a fan base out there and has absolutely no idea unless somebody tries to approach him and he barks at them. But otherwise, he's living a very good life and just napping most of the day.
Well, he's such a cute dog. And Mina, I want to talk with you about my books because you are somebody that really goes beyond the lines. I mean, I always say that there's a tremendous difference between a culture of excellence versus building a superior culture of excellence. And there's a gigantic difference between attention to details versus building superior discipline details. And you have that culture. I put you in that superior culture of excellence. Now, can you share about what you do behind the scenes to really be as prepared as possible?
Well, the word prepared is probably the most important one to me, because I think whether it was as a reporter or in radio and podcasting or doing television, I've found that the number one key to anything I've done, successful or whatnot, but the thing that's made me the most confident going into all of these new challenges is just mountains of preparation. As a writer, when I wrote features about athletes, I used to spend so much time just reading everything, putting together exhaustive outlines. And then as a television analyst, what I say on television is just the tip of a tiny iceberg of the work, the preparation in terms of, studying, watching tape, gathering stats, all of that. And I only get to use a tiny bit of it. But because I have that iceberg below me, it makes me feel confident when I go on TV, especially if it's live TV. And I consider it essential to everything I do.
Oh, for sure. And Mina, you mentioned Michael Bennett, our friend, our mutual friend. I mean, since he retired from the NFL, I've been coaching and training him in tennis. And I know that you said you love the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, he's part of the Legion of Boom. Tell me your thoughts about what you admire and like about Michael Bennett.
Yeah, Mike's one of my favorite subjects I ever interviewed back when I was a writer. He's a really, really special person. I think his post NFL career really speaks to how special he is because, when you make the kind of earnings he did, well deserved over an incredibly, I would say underrated actually, football career, you don't really have to do much for the rest of your life. But he's such a intellectually curious person, such a creative mind that it's been fun from afar to watch him explore his passions, travel with his lovely wife, to learn about new things like architecture and the arts and different cultures. And, I think it's really inspiring because I'll tell you this, a lot of times when guys retire from the NFL, it can be difficult, frankly, making that transition to that second part of your life because their whole lives have led to playing, especially if you play at a high level like Mike did. So to see someone like him put together such a cool post-playing career is really, really neat to watch from afar.
No, you're so right. I mean, Michael and I, we get into some really deep topics and really some deep talks. And he's going to University of Hawaii studying architecture right now, like you mentioned. And he really wants to help the community. I mean, he does so many things behind the scenes. It's just so commendable. And And Mina, I want to ask you, when you're doing a live broadcast and you're at a stadium and the fans are there, how how special is it? How much do you feel that energy being among the fans?
It's great. Yeah. So we NFL Live is typically a studio show, but we do travel for big events. The Super Bowl, actually the Pro Bowl as well, but the draft, the combine too, where there's fans there. And when we do those events and we're on, in the city where the event is happening and just surrounded by football fans, you can't help but feed off of their energy. We see the numbers of how many people watch not just our show, but football content generally, football shows, and of course, obviously, football games are still the biggest broadcasts in America. But it's very different to actually see those fans in person and to remember, the reason that we get to do what we do is because there are so many people in not just America, but the world who are incredibly passionate about the sport we cover.
So, of the places you've traveled to, these stadiums, I mean, obviously, every stadium that you go to, it's like super passionate fans. Who has the extra passionate fans?
Well, Seahawks fans would be mad if I didn't say Seattle. I would view it
Yeah.
as something of a betrayal, and that is an incredibly intense game day atmosphere. If you're ever there, it is as loud as they say. Kansas City, I would say, is up there too in terms of the volume and the passion. So I would probably say those two really jump out. Um, yeah, I would probably pick those two. Although, I used to go to games at the Meadowlands in New York, and I was always really impressed by Giants fans. They've definitely got some passionate fans there.
Yeah, that's why I had to say extra passionate. And Mina, you have been doing color commentating for the Los Angeles Rams. What do you like about doing color commentating?
Oh man, it's just a totally different challenge from analysis, where you get to kind of sit down and go through your thoughts and think about football, the games, the trends versus commentating. It's a lot closer to like being in the game yourself because you're just having to react in the moment, and there's a different sort of energy you feed off of it, even if it is the preseason, and you're looking for different things that time of year from the regular season that'll matter for a TV broadcast. But ultimately, you're talking about football, so it's the same, and it's just very exciting to be in the moment.
Well, Mina, it's very impressive that you really do it all. I mean, you can do it all. It's just amazing what you do. And I want to ask you, of the current head coaches in football or recent head coaches in football, who are some of the head coaches that you feel are some of the best to ever coach the game?
Well, the best coach to ever coach the game in the history of the sport is Bill Belichick, in my opinion, who is, of course, current NFL coach. Um, his record of accomplishment speaks for itself, but from like a football nerd perspective, I just think the way he's evolved his approach over the years, um, both offense and defense, the especially in defense, I think on a game to game basis, even he's one of the oldest coaches in the NFL, but his adaptability is so inspiring. You really never know what the Patriots are going to bring to the table, and he crafts these game plans for different quarterbacks that are always exciting to watch. And then I would say also, in the league right now, future Hall of Famer Andy Reid. On the other side of the ball, again, now that he's got these Super Bowls, I think his record easily puts him in that territory. But he's another one where I think it's the creativity and continued flexibility and the fact that he continues to evolve at his age that I find so impressive and inspiring.
What are your thoughts about Coach Pete Carroll being, so successful in college and successful
Yeah.
in the NFL, but for such a long period of time?
Yeah, he's a remarkable coach. And I think I would actually say I am guilty of kind of underrating him at points in his career, especially near the end of the Russell Wilson era, because what he showed last season in terms of his ability to reset the roster and make the Seahawks competitive after moving on from Wilson was remarkable. But he's also a guy who, to, I think, really appreciate how good he is as a coach, you have to speak to his players, because sometimes being a quote unquote players coach can be seen as almost like a I wouldn't say criticism, but it undermines like the brilliance of a head coach. Oh, he just gets along with the players. But it's an integral part of coaching, is relating to your players, teaching them, getting them to buy in. And there's frankly very few people who are better at that than Pete Carroll.
I agree. I mean, it's all part of getting them to buy into your philosophy and then really pressing the right buttons for them to have peak performance, not sometimes, but all the time. And I want to ask you, Mina, we talked about some of the great head coaches there. Tom Brady, is he the greatest of all time, or who else would there be next to him?
Yeah, it's Tom Brady. I think you can parse it out by saying talented. Is he the most talented at his, peak? Is he his best? And maybe you can mount cases for other players, Rodgers, Montana, whatever. But if to me, the GOAT title, if you're really considering both ability and accomplishment, there's no one that comes close to Brady. And what he's achieved in terms of his Super Bowl rings is obviously going to be very challenging for any player to match.
I completely agree with you. And Mina, what's a future goal or future goals of yours?
At this point in my career, my goals are less like about levels or places that I like to be, and more about the way in which I do my job, which is to say, my goal is kind of, I wouldn't say at mastery, but it's to get better at talking about football, to understand the game better, to have a better understanding of advanced concepts. Those are my goals at this point in my career. And because it's such a complicated sport, there's just so much to learn. And I look forward to learning for a long time.
Mina, I want to ask you one more thing before we wrap up. You've been around greatness. You've seen greatness, and greatness can be defined in many ways. How would you define greatness?
I think greatness is a combination of mastery, accomplishment, but also authenticity. It's achieved when someone is true to who they are and their principles, and then executes upon those principles in a very unique manner.
Wow, I love that definition of greatness. Mina, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. You are very inspiring. I know you're going to inspire a whole new generation of young people, but you inspire all people, and you are all about that superior culture of excellence. I really want to thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
And thank you for watching Beyond the Lines on ThinkTech Hawaii. For more information, please visit rustykomori.com, and my books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I hope that Mina and I will inspire you to create your own superior culture of excellence and to find your greatness and help others find theirs. Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.
Come out, coming show next week to